All right, deep divers. Today we're going to be talking about software development.
Okay.
And specifically, we're going to be talking about the V model.
All right.
So looks like from the resources that you guys have sent in,
Mm.
you're really interested in learning more about how this model can be used to ensure
Yeah.
robust software
Right.
through testing.
Right.
And, it's definitely considered, I think, a step up from the old waterfall method.
For sure.
So let's dive in and see what makes it tick.
Yeah, I think that's a great place to start.
Okay.
The V model is all about building quality into the software from the very beginning.
Okay.
And to understand why that's so important, let's rewind a bit and look at the waterfall model.
Okay.
So imagine you're building a house.
Right.
In the waterfall model, you would complete each stage sequentially.
Okay.
So you'd start with the foundation, then you move on to the walls, then the roof, then you do the plumbing, the electrical, and finally the painting. You wouldn't move on to the next phase until the previous one was completely finished.
So very linear, step by step.
Exactly.
Sounds logical enough.
Yeah, it does.
But what's the catch?
Well, the problem is that if you discover a major flaw in the foundation,
Oh.
after you've already built the walls and the roof,
Yeah.
it becomes a massive headache to fix.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And the same principle applies to software development.
Okay.
In the waterfall model, testing typically happens at the very end of the development cycle.
Okay.
So that means if a critical bug is found late in the game, it can be incredibly expensive and time-consuming to fix.
It's kind of like realizing you put the wrong windows in after you've already finished the siding and the paint.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yes.
You got to rip everything out,
Right.
start over.
Yeah, so how does the V model address this?
So the V model tackles this by essentially flipping the script on testing.
Okay.
Instead of leaving it as an afterthought, it integrates testing throughout the entire development lifecycle.
Gotcha.
So if you visualize a V shape.
Okay. The left side represents the various development stages.
Okay.
From requirements gathering all the way to coding.
Mm-hmm.
And then the right side of the V mirrors the left,
Okay.
with each development stage having a corresponding testing phase.
It's like double checking the blueprint at every step of the way, making sure that you know what you've built so far is actually what you intended to build.
Exactly.
And that it's going to work with everything else that you're going to add on later.
Yeah, you got it.
Okay. So this early and continuous testing, this is really the heart of the V model.
It is.
And it allows teams to catch and fix defects much earlier in the process when it's far less disruptive and costly.
Yes, and studies have shown that defects introduced during the requirements and design phases actually account for almost half of all software defects.
Wow.
And as we know, the later a defect is found, the more expensive it is to fix.
Yeah, for sure. So V model is all about shifting left, so to speak, and integrating testing early and often.
Exactly.
So let's break down each stage of this V-shaped journey.
What's the first step?
Well, it all starts with requirements gathering,
Okay.
which is arguably the most crucial stage.
Okay.
This is where you define exactly what the software needs to do, who will use it, and what problems it should solve.
It's like creating that really detailed blueprint for your house.
Yes,
Wow.
exactly.
Yeah.
Outlining every room, every fixture, every detail.
Gotcha. And on the right side of the V, the corresponding testing phase for this stage is acceptance testing, right?
That's right.
Acceptance testing ensures that the final software actually meets those initial requirements.
So it's like having the homeowner do a final walkthrough
Exactly.
and sign off
Yeah.
before they move in.
Exactly.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
So once the requirements are nailed down and vetted, what's next?
The next stage, the design phase.
Okay.
And here, the development team translates those requirements into a high-level design,
Okay.
deciding on things like the programming language, the database structure, and the overall architecture of the software, like deciding on the architectural style of your house, the materials to be used, the layout of the rooms.
Yeah, precisely.
Okay. And I'm guessing the corresponding testing phase here is all about making sure that those design choices are sound.
Absolutely. This is where system testing comes in.
Okay.
It verifies that the overall design functions as intended and that the different components of the software will work together seamlessly.
So like making sure the plumbing and electrical systems are compatible before you start building the walls.
Exactly.
Okay.
System testing ensures that the software is fundamentally sound before moving on to the actual coding phase.
Okay, so we've gathered the requirements, we've designed the system,
Right.
we've tested the design.
Yes.
Now we're getting to the nitty-gritty,
Yes.
the actual build stage.
This is where the developers take center stage.
Okay.
They translate the design into lines of code.
Okay.
They build individual components like specific features or modules, ensuring they function correctly on their own.
Gotcha. So it's like the construction crew is framing the walls, installing the plumbing, wiring the house.
Yeah, a good analogy.
Right.
Each component needs to be built and inspected individually before being integrated into the whole.
And the testing phase for this stage is where we check those individual components.
Precisely. This is where unit testing shines.
Okay.
Each unit of code is rigorously tested in isolation to ensure it functions as expected.
Gotcha. So it's like having a building inspector check the electrical wiring in each room.
Yes.
Before connecting it to the main power supply.
Exactly.
So the V model is really all about this continuous feedback loop testing at every stage to catch errors early on.
Yes, it is.
But even with all this testing,
Mm-hmm.
I imagine there's still bound to be some bugs that slip through the cracks.
That's true. And that's why the V model also includes a dedicated testing phase,
Right.
which focuses on integration testing.
Right.
So once the individual units of code have been thoroughly tested,
Right.
they need to be integrated and tested as a whole.
So integration testing is like making sure all the different parts of the house work together seamlessly.
Yes.
The plumbing doesn't leak into the electrical wiring. The
Yeah.
doors open and close properly.
All right.
And the roof doesn't cave in when it rains.
You got it.
Okay.
Integration testing ensures that the software functions as a cohesive whole, with all the different components working together harmoniously.
This is really fascinating stuff.
It is a very robust model.
It's like peeking behind the curtain of software development
Yeah.
and seeing how much thought and planning goes into building a robust system.
A lot of forethought goes into it
Yes.
to make sure that it's going to work properly when it's launched.
Okay, well, let's take a pause here.
Okay.
And we'll come back in just a minute to explore some more of this.
Sounds good.
Welcome back, deep divers.
Yes.
We were just taking a deep dive into the V model,
Yes.
exploring each stage and how it emphasizes testing throughout the software development process.
Right.
But here's a question that's been on my mind. Is the V model really only applicable to software development?
That's a great question.
Or can we learn something from it that applies to other areas of our lives?
Yeah, I think that, the V model at its core is a framework for managing complexity and minimizing risk.
Okay.
And those are principles that can be applied to a wide range of projects, not just software.
I'm intrigued. Give me an example.
Oh.
How can we apply the V model to, say, planning a major event, like a conference or a wedding?
All right, let's take a wedding as an example.
Okay.
So using the V model as a framework, the first step would be requirements gathering.
Okay.
So instead of jumping straight into like booking a venue or picking a date,
Right.
you would start by defining the vision for the wedding.
Okay.
So what kind of atmosphere do you want to create?
Mm-hmm.
What are your priorities?
Okay.
Is it the ceremony, the food, the music?
Yeah.
How many guests are you expecting? What's your budget?
So it's like establishing the blueprint before you start building the house?
Yes, exactly. You really want to have that clear vision in mind.
And the corresponding testing phase would be ensuring that all those initial decisions align with the overall vision.
Exactly.
Wow.
You wouldn't want to book a lavish ballroom
Right.
if you're aiming for an intimate, rustic-themed wedding.
Yeah, that would be a mismatch.
That's where acceptance testing comes in.
Okay.
Making sure that each decision made throughout the process is in line with the original vision and requirements.
Okay, so once we have a clear vision
Yeah.
and we've tested our initial assumptions, what's next?
The next stage would be the design phase,
Okay.
where you start making concrete plans.
Okay.
So this would involve choosing a venue, selecting a caterer, hiring a photographer, sending out invitations, and so on.
And this is where the V model reminds us to test those decisions.
Exactly.
Yeah.
System testing in this scenario might involve visiting potential venues, tasting menus from different caterers, or reviewing portfolios of photographers.
Right.
It's about making sure those individual components meet your standards and will contribute to the overall success of the event.
So it's not just about ticking things off a checklist.
Yeah.
It's about making informed decisions
Right.
based on thorough research and testing.
Exactly.
Okay.
And then the build stage would be the actual execution of those plans.
Okay.
Sending out invitations, coordinating with vendors, setting up the venue, and so on.
And I'm guessing unit testing in this context would be about making sure each individual task is handled properly.
Yes, exactly.
Like confirming RSVPs, double-checking delivery times for flowers, making sure the sound system is working properly.
Exactly. It's about paying attention to the details and making sure each component is functioning as expected.
Right.
And then, of course, there's integration testing.
Okay.
This might involve doing a walkthrough of the venue a few days before the wedding,
Okay.
making sure the tables are set up correctly, the lighting is working, and the flow of the event is smooth.
It's like that final dress rehearsal before opening night, making sure everybody knows their cues and everything runs seamlessly.
That's a great analogy. Okay.
And then, of course, comes the big day deployment.
Right. All those months of planning and testing culminate in this moment.
Yes.
But even then, the V model reminds us that there's still one more stage,
Right.
maintenance.
Yes.
But the wedding is over. What's there to maintain?
Well, it's not about literal maintenance in this case,
Okay.
but rather about reflection and learning.
Okay.
So after the wedding, you take some time to evaluate how everything went.
Okay.
What worked well? What could have been better?
Yeah.
What would you do differently next time?
So it's about gathering feedback, learning from the experience, and applying those lessons to future events.
Exactly. The V model encourages us to approach projects with a mindset of continuous improvement.
Right.
And that's a valuable lesson that can be applied to any area of our lives, not just software development or event planning.
Right. It's about being proactive, thinking ahead, and testing our assumptions along the way.
Yeah.
It's a powerful framework for mitigating risks and ensuring success no matter what we're trying to achieve. I completely agree, and I think one of the most valuable takeaways from the V model is the importance of communication and collaboration.
Okay.
So in software development, it's crucial for developers, testers, and project managers to work together closely throughout the entire process. And that same principle applies to any project, really.
So it's not just about following a set of steps.
No.
It's about building a culture of collaboration.
Right.
Where everyone is involved in the planning, testing, and execution of the project.
Absolutely. And when everyone is on the same page, sharing information and working towards a common goal, the chances of success increase dramatically.
This has been incredibly enlightening.
Mm-hmm.
I'm starting to see the V model not just as a software development model, but as a philosophy for approaching any complex project with a mindset of planning, testing, and continuous improvement.
I'm glad to hear that it's a powerful concept that can truly transform the way we approach challenges and achieve our goals.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground today, deep divers.
We have.
We've explored the intricacies of the V model, from its origins in software development to its surprising applications in other areas of our lives.
Right.
But before we wrap up this deep dive, I have one final thought-provoking question for you to ponder.
Okay.
And we'll be right back after a quick word from our sponsors. We're back, and, you left us with a pretty thought-provoking question there.
I did.
So I'm excited to hear what you have to say.
All right. Well, what if we use the V model as a framework for personal growth?
Okay, now that is thought-provoking.
Yeah.
But, how would that even work?
Well, think about it.
We're not coding ourselves, are we?
Not in the literal sense. No, of course not.
Right.
But think about the process of personal growth. We set goals, we make plans, we encounter obstacles, we adjust our approach. It's a dynamic process, much like developing software.
I see where you're going with this.
Yeah.
So the requirements gathering stage for personal growth would be like defining our goals.
Exactly.
Right. What do we want to achieve and why is it important to us?
Exactly. And just like in the V model, specificity is key. Right. So instead of saying I want to be more productive, right, we would define what productivity actually means to us.
Okay.
Is it finishing that novel? Is it launching a side hustle? Or simply streamlining our daily routines?
So instead of vague aspirations, we need concrete, measurable goals.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, and then we move on to the design stage.
Right.
Where we create a roadmap for achieving those goals.
That's right. This is where we break down those big goals into smaller, more manageable steps. So, for example, if your goal is to write a novel, your design phase might involve outlining the plot, creating character profiles, or setting daily writing targets.
And this is where the testing comes in, right?
Right.
But how do we test our personal growth plans?
Well, system testing in this context could involve researching different writing techniques.
Okay.
Maybe joining a writer's group for feedback, or even experimenting with different writing software to see what works best for you.
So it's about gathering information, testing our assumptions, and making sure that, our plan is solid before we dive in.
Precisely.
To the actual writing.
Yeah. And then, of course, comes the build stage.
Right.
The actual work of writing the novel.
Right. So this is where, the discipline and the consistency and the perseverance come into play.
Exactly.
You got to put in the work.
And unit testing in this, I guess, would be like those moments of self-reflection where we evaluate our progress and we identify obstacles.
Exactly.
And make adjustments to our approach as needed.
It's about holding ourselves accountable, celebrating small wins, and learning from our setbacks.
Okay.
And then as the novel takes shape, we move on to integration testing,
Okay.
which might involve sharing chapters with beta readers for feedback,
Okay.
or working with an editor to polish the manuscript.
So it's like checking in to make sure that all the pieces are fitting together.
Sure, exactly. And finally, we reached the deployment stage.
Publishing the novel.
Publishing the novel, yes.
Yeah.
It's the culmination of all those hours of planning and writing and testing and refining.
Yes, it is. But just like in software development, the journey doesn't end there.
Right. The maintenance phase for personal growth, I guess, would be reflecting on the experience.
Yes.
Learning from the feedback we receive,
Mm-hmm.
and continuing to hone our craft.
Exactly. It's about embracing that ongoing process of growth and evolution.
So the V model applied to personal growth encourages us to approach our goals with the same rigor and intentionality
Yes.
that we would apply it to any complex project.
Exactly. It's about planning, testing, iterating, and never stopping learning.
It's about approaching life with a growth mindset,
I love that.
embracing challenges as opportunities for learning,
Yeah.
and constantly striving to become the best versions of ourselves.
Absolutely.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for taking us on this deep dive into the V model.
You're welcome.
It's been really eye-opening exploring not just a software development model, but a powerful framework for approaching any challenge with a mindset of planning, testing, and continuous improvement.
We hope you guys have enjoyed it as much as we have, and we'll see you next time for another deep dive.